Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 to order. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to start with a roll call.
Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Wood.
Councilmember Wood, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey here.
Councilmember Fleming.
Councilmember Fleming here.
Councilmember Belisi.
Councilmember Belisi here.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa present.
And Mayor Worthington.
Mayor Worthington, present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. It's official, we're here and we're do business. With that in mind, let's move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mayor, this is Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. I make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa has a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Councilmember Belisi, I second.
We have a second with Councilmember Belisi. Are there any objections to approval of the agenda? I don't see any. With that, the agenda, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Tell you what, with that, the agenda is approved. And then let me get back to the top of the meeting and get back to the Pledge of Allegiance that I neglected. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Belisi.
All those in the chamber, can you please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good, and thank you. All right. That brings us to our public comment section of the agenda. And this is an opportunity for members of the public to bring matters of interest to the City Council's attention. Folks have 3 minutes to speak. We are remote in this meeting, and there are instructions on the screen now as to how you can make comment. Those wishing to participate can call 1-509-342-7253. As you can see there, there is also a conference ID number, which is 196-005-742, excuse me, 005-724 pound. And welcome any comments you have within our time frame. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to ask if there is a motion to approve the consent agenda, and then we'll come back for comments. So is there a motion? To approve? Yes,
Mayor,
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
sorry. Mayor, this is Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Councilmember Belisi, I second.
Lisi seconds. Are there any objections to approval of the consent agenda? Any objections? Okay. If not, the consent agenda is approved. In the intervening few minutes, we have not had any members of the public join us for comment. And with that in mind, we will then move on to the city manager report. Mr. Sugg, are you standing by there?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We appreciate the community's patience as our public works crew deals with the many potholes that have developed over this winter. With a combination of large amounts of rain, water, and seeping into the cracks through pavement, as well as the extraordinarily cold, freezing conditions that we had for that week, we all remember. Which we haven't seen in a while, that becomes a problem when that frozen pavement thaws and more potholes surface and develop. So as the weather permits, our crew will be out fixing streets, with hot mix asphalt pavement. They'll be cutting out the damaged sections and replacing those with asphalt pavement. That can only be done in dry weather, which has been in short supply until recently. We had the crew out this morning, but it did start raining. So I'm not sure how many, hopefully as we move forward, we'll see more and more days where it's dry as opposed to wet and rainy. Again, that pretty much shuts us down. And we realize it's inconvenient and the ride across our pavement is not as smooth as we'd like it to be. So we're working on it. We appreciate the community's patience, and that's my report, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Zug. Appreciate the update, and we're looking forward to getting those potholes fixed. But understand there's some practical issues that need to take place, or the situation needs to be right for us first. I was Shark, Councilmember McCluskey.
Yes, Mayor. You froze on me for a minute, so I didn't know if you were calling on me or not.
Sorry
Apologize
about
for
that.
my delay if you did.
I
would like
had
to
it.
ask Mr. Sugg, in lieu of getting the pavements properly done for the potholes, which I think is essential and a smart thing to do, is there a temporary fix on the ones that are more egregious and that could blow out tires, to have some sort of gravel over it temporarily? Just asking that.
There is I'm not a pavement expert, although I have dealt with pavements in the past in my career. There is something called cold mix, which is something that comes in a bag. It's definitely a temporary fix, and you need to it lasts. It maybe last a few days. You'd be lucky if it lasts a week, depending on the amount of traffic. That and you have to keep filling the hole with cold mix. So I'll get with the Public Works Department and director and find out if there's something we can do in the interim on some of these that are, again, as you point out, the larger potholes that are difficult for drivers to miss. So we definitely want everyone's cars to not need a front end alignment or something like that, or a blowout tire. So we're actually working. It is prioritized. It's the highest priority, short of the next ice storm or short of the next snowstorm, which we're always prepared for, is to get on those pavement potholes. So thank you for that question. We'll circle back and let you know about that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Any other questions of Mr. Sugg before we move to council comments? I don't see any hands, so I think we'll do that. And I'm going to turn to Councilmember Keel to start us off with that. Do you have any comments, Councilmember Keel?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Just one comment. You all may have received an email from AWC. I'm trying to look for it now. AWC earlier, but there are just two. As you know, the legislative session is in, and there are two bills that, two companion bills that are being before the legislature that AWC is really urging opposition on. And one is the Senate Bill 1574. I'll get them all for you. What I'll do is I'll forward the email that I had from AWC, but basically those two bills, both in the House and the Senate, they're calling for when a city is sued through some kind of tort claims, the bill proposes that interests on payment, if the claimant is found to be successful. They're saying that the city is liable for interest all the way back to the time of the incident, as opposed to interest at the time of the claim at the court, once the award was given in court, which is crazy from AWC's standpoint, because if you got injured and you didn't get to court until a year or two later, if you're found, if you get awarded, then the city has to pay interest all the way going back to 2 years, which is kind of crazy, because how are you going to pay interest on something that wasn't even a claim before it was even a claim? So we're urging opposition to that, and as I said, our AWC lobbyists are doing that. And if you all could put in a call, I mean, I've made the calls already to our legislative folks, and I would invite you to do the same as well. I think that's all. I'll stop there for now, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to Councilmember Wood.
Just one comment. I was on the day of that windstorm and high tide combined that kind of hit South Spit-Day Island. Got to go down there and see the road crews at work and the city engineer and some other folks that were out there. So it was just really good to see them out there. They're working quickly, working well, identifying problems with the road. And just wanted to tell Steve and city staff that it was good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to get the comment. Councilmember McCluskey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, as you all know, I live there, and we did have a little flooding going on, but we were totally caught off guard for some reason. Typically, we're ahead of the game with things to protect from the oncoming tide. And so what I noted, I was working. By the time it's like coming back to, I left it, I came back, and if I saw all the debris in front of the houses, including my house, and some of the beach and the waves, floated into my house all the way to the back, to the back deck area as well. But there was minimal damage, thank goodness. These are old houses. They stood the test of many storms, I am sure. And so what I noted about the street is that when I drove down, I was able to park as usual, no big deal, but the streets looked more pristine than when I left it that morning. So I would like to give big kudos to our city staff for coming down so quickly to make sure that, one, as well as the engineering department, that our road wasn't undermined and that it was safe to travel on, as well as they picked up all the debris that certainly some of the residents could not manage on their own, because some of the wood pieces were quite large. And so they were out there working diligently, extremely hard from what I gather. And so there was a lot of them out there too, to make sure that things were cleared and that people could, drive the roads, as well as Amazon trucks too. So with that, I certainly, since I live there, am very grateful that they were out there so quickly, because I was thinking, hey, there could be other emergencies. I didn't know what was going on in the other parts of the city, but I was grateful that what they did it so quickly. And the fire was out there, and Pierce County was out there. And so when I drove over the bridge, I'm going, now what, right? All right, so that's all. I don't have any other report, Mayor. Thank you for the time to make my comment.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Appreciate that. And Councilmember Fleming, anything you'd like to add?
Say again, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I was just asking if you have any comments you'd like to
Oh,
make.
thank you. Just real quick. First, to the city manager, thank you for picking up on the pothole issue in the city. I know from my drive arounds, it's not just now limited to 1 or 2 streets. We have several of our thoroughfares that are affected. So, again, thank you for going on point for that. To the road crew for the city, those folks since inception have always been on point and a tip of the spear when it came to storms in this city. They always rise above and go beyond the call of duty, ensuring that our citizens stay safe and that our roadways stay clear. This storm was certainly no different. They've set a bar that's pretty high and hard to beat by any other community around us. So likewise, I extend the kudos to that crew, and I hope at some point in time the city can, and when I say the city, primarily the council, can acknowledge that staff for always being there for the citizens and putting them first above all else. So thanks to those folks. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you for the comments. I echo those as well. Let's see, that brings us to Councilmember Polisi.
No comments at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Good. And Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, do you have comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Only one clarification or a request from Ashley to Councilmember Keel, and that is on the email that you sent forward from AWC for those bills that need to oppose. Is I believe it might be easier. There's a link, if you can send the link that we can actually go on to actually officially oppose it. Actually make go further than sometimes when we call in, it doesn't get really counted, but I believe that if it does get counted officially, if you go on there's a special link, and I forget what it's called, but there is a link that you can then go in and oppose or not, and who you are.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. The email I have will have a hyperlink to that. It'll have the bill name and it'll have a hyperlink and go right there.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. And appreciate that, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. Let's see, Councilmember Wood, do you have a follow-up comment?
There you go. Yes, I do have a quick follow-up comment. Speaking of bills before the House and Senate, has anybody, AWC or somebody, done an assessment on the law enforcement adjustment bills they're looking at doing right now, and whether we should be favoring them, opposing them? Has there been any assessment on if they're what we're looking for?
Councilmember Keel, would you like to take that on?
I will. Thank you. But before I get to your question, Councilman Wood, I do want to respond one more time to Councilman Figueroa. The hyperlink is there, but I think it's also important to call our legislative committee members, legislative members, because they're voting on it, right? And so they'll see our bill. If you go online, your word, and you'll be all linked up there, but they may not see it in time for their vote, right? So if you could do both, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And as far as the police bills, Councilmember Wood, AWC is neck deep into that conversation around all of the bills, and our goal is to make the bills better, right? I mean, there's a lot of consternation on everyone's part around clarity and the lack thereof clarity, and so we are talking with legislators in both houses right now, talking about specific bills and specific language, and actually talking with the Sheriff's Association and the Police Officers Association as well, to get some clarity around what it is that they, now that they've had a year of experience, what in particular they're talking about that needs to be made better. And so I'm as president, I'll be in some of those conversations as well. But I'll tell you that it's hard for me to summarize all those points because there's a lot of them, right? And each bill has its own little thing. And so I would be happy to bring back to this council some kind of written document that might summarize all that stuff. I don't have it today, but to answer your question, yes, And the goal is to bring about clarity, because we want to make sure that officers can still do their jobs and be safe and enforce the law, as well as trying to balance off, safety for the community as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, let's see. I think I'll take my turn as mayor as well with a couple of comments. First off, I also want to thank our public works crews. The efforts they put forth during the snow removal. We had our community was as well prepared as could be. They showed professionalism in that. We received a number of comments from citizens appreciating that effort as well. And in any case, it does give me certainly a good deal of pleasure in having them associated, me being associated with them, I should say, and how they're representing the city and our community there. With regards to some of the legislative discussion, city staff, principally with Eric's help, has been working to set up a meeting of the 28th District Delegation. And actually, that's taking place on Thursday. And I'll have a chance to chat with Senator Nobles along with our House representatives a little later on that day. In my 15 minutes or so, or our 15 minutes of time, which is standard for what's available, as several people here are very well acquainted, I'll have an opportunity to talk about our concerns over the House bill and the Senate bill as well. I did have a chance to see the AWC announcement and noted the issues associated with that. And while there may be some good merit in the overall bill, some sort of surgical fix here might be able to move that forward. One of the sponsors happens to be a representative out of a neighboring district, and I just want to make sure they know about our concerns, but there are fixes that are available, I believe. I'm also going to be participating in the City Action Days coming up tomorrow with the Association of Washington Cities, and while my schedule's a little busy with some conflicting meetings, we'll work that out and continue to participate in that arena as well. And then with that, I think we are ready to move into our study session and our regular meeting tonight, but then convene in the study session. And unless there's some objection, we're now in our study session, where Kevin Brisky is, I think, going to lead us off talking about the 20th Street Landing legislative amendment. Is that right, Kevin?
Yes, that is correct.
All yours.
So thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Kevin Brisky with the Community and Economic Development Division, here to further talk about the private application the city has received for 3 zoning text amendments relating to the 27th Street Landing project. David Swindell is also in attendance tonight, who presented at the last meeting and took the amendments through the Planning Commission process. We also have in attendance the applicant and 2 of his consultants who are available later after my presentation to answer any questions and talk about their project. So what I'd like to talk about tonight is what's been done so far with the application, so where the process has been and where it's came to now. I've got a short PowerPoint I'd like to show to go a little more specifically over the 3 proposed amendments. And after and during the PowerPoint, be available to answer any questions regarding the proposed amendments, and also any direction from the council moving forward, as you know, we'd like to at a future meeting bring back in ordinance for council consideration. So the city has received an application for a text amendment to the zoning code, 3 text amendments to the zoning code. The city has taken that to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has held several meetings regarding the proposed amendments, including a public hearing. For the public hearing, the city mailed out notices to surrounding property owners within 300 feet and 2 parcels deep, as is our standard process. Posted it also in the News Tribune and city website. We didn't have any public show up to the public hearing besides the property owner and applicant. And we did receive a couple of follow-up questions and comments, one from a neighboring property who had questions who we just responded to, and another one from the car wash that's located on the other side of 27th, who just had questions regarding the proposed project. So after the public hearing, the Planning Commission did vote for the amendments and recommended them for approval and forwarded them to the City Council. And that's where we're at now in the process. And we've had one City Council meeting to go over, start going over the proposal. So if you will indulge me for a moment, I would like to share my screen and just go over the amendments in a little more detail with you. I'll wait a minute. Hopefully that showed up for everybody. Okay. So a little bit here, just go over the property just a little bit and along with the amendments to orientate yourself. I've got 5 slides, so pretty short presentation here, but just to orientate yourself, because I have a similar aerial picture on each one. Over here, on the right-hand side of the project, if you can see my pointer here is 67th Street, Fircrest Golf Course over on this side. Further to the right, to the that'd be to the east. To the north side of the property here is 27th Street. That turns into Mildred as it goes around the corner. Up in the very top here, you'll at least be familiar as I am, at least, with the Starbucks drive-through that's located in this building on this side. So the property is approximately 7 acres. It consists of 2 zones: mixed-use urban industrial 75, which here is the dark blue, lighter blue, and the pink zone, and then the residential 1 or R1 zoned properties. This slide here, I color-coded these zones that as I go through the amendments to just try to help provide some clarity on where and what they kind of apply to. On this first slide, what I wanted to point out is the dark blue mixed-use urban industrial zone. This area, there's no proposed changes. You're allowed under the current zoning, you're allowed outright up to 75 feet in height, and you're allowed a mix of uses from residential, commercial, and so forth. The mixed-use urban, also here, the lighter blue color, the mixed-use urban industrial zone 75 here. These 2 pieces do abut R1 zone properties on the outside of their project area that they have potentially to purchase. Our current zoning only allows buildings on this piece to go to 45 feet. They are not proposing any changes, and there's no proposed changes to those 2 pieces. So under our current zoning, you have a 30-foot setback for buildings on this piece to the outside R1 zone pieces, and you're allowed up to 45 feet in building height. One other thing, I know this came up in other council discussions, is just want to point out again that under our current zoning, we do require an L1 landscape buffer around the perimeter of this project site abutting any external R1 residential uses. So what that means is along, if you can follow my pointer, along the outside of the property here, that requires an L1 landscape buffer. And what that entails is a 20-foot wide landscape buffer that is it's essentially 2 rows of evergreen trees that are spaced approximately a total of 7.5 feet apart, which creates a site obscuring screen along that edge. The proposal has a potential connection out here to 67th. I would like to also bring up, because traffic's been talked about, currently we don't have an exact proposal. We don't know the full scope of the proposal. We have several, potential options out there. These proposed zoning text amendments create some flexibility for the applicant in what they can do on the properties that they're buying to allow something to move forward. If something does move forward at that time, depending on the number of units and number of commercial, those impacts would be analyzed through the State Environmental Policy Act process, in which they'd be required to provide a traffic impact analysis and mitigate for any traffic concerns. So I'd like to go into the 3 amendments now and go into the next slide. The first amendment, the applicant requests an amendment to reduce the side and rear yard setback for buildings in the mixed-use urban industrial 75 zone, abutting R1 or R2 zones from 30 feet to 10 feet when the abutting R1 or R2 parcels are part of the project site. I hashed out an area here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. This might help. So what this amendment would entail is they currently, under our current zoning, they're required to have a 30-foot setback from R1 zone properties for any buildings. And that is this outside hashed area here. Because they would be purchasing these R1 zone properties in the aqua color, they're requesting to reduce that setback to 10 feet to that property line of those R1 zone parcels that they would be purchasing. That is basically a reduction in the setback from 30 feet to 10 feet to a property line that is considered internal to their project area, and thus the separation between any buildings that they would be building on the mixed-use urban 75 piece and any outside single-family residences would be buffered, or the distance would be located here on the existing R1 zone pieces they would be proposing to use as parking. So they're asking to reduce the setback here in these hashed areas to an internal lot line to what they would be purchasing within their project area. And that's, once again, right in this area here. The next, the second amendment is related to a proposed height increase from 45 to 75. And I'll just read the proposed amendment. The maximum height is limited to 45 feet on portions of a property abutting an R1 or R2 zone if the R1 or R2 zone is not part of a project site. If the abutting R1 or R2 zone parcels are part of the project site, then the maximum height is 75 feet. And this would apply to the highlighted parcel in pink. So a very large portion of their site that they are looking to purchase here, it's zoned mixed use urban industrial, but because it abuts these R1 zone pieces they'd be purchasing, our current code limits the height on this piece to 45 feet. Because they'd be looking at purchasing, once again, these R1 zone pieces, creating separation between the outside single family homes, they're requesting to allow this to go to the full height allowed in the zone of 75 feet. And because of the size of this particular parcel, allowing that flexibility is really of potentially a great need to redevelop this site. I want to point out back to the start here on this would not apply to these mixed use urban 75 pieces, which are still limited to 45 feet in height because they abut R1 zones that are not part of the project site. This would just apply to the pink zoned highlighted mixed use urban 75 piece I've circling here with my laser pointer. And the third and final amendment is relating to the R1 zoned parcels. Currently, the R1 zone parcels that they would be purchasing are fairly, excuse me, fairly limited in what can be developed from an intensity standpoint to single family homes primarily. Their request here is to amend our accessory uses to essentially allow accessory surface parking and underground parking structures may be located on parcels zoned R1 when the R1 zone properties are part of a project site. And that parking is accessory to a permitted use on an adjoining parcel zone mixed use urban 75. So what we're talking about here is the aqua colored R1 zone pieces, primarily up in the north portion of the site. And what they would be proposing to do would be either surface or underground parking on this site. And this parcel here out to 67th would also provide access. That's currently allowed under our current zoning. So they would wish to use this site for parking. The R1 zone piece down here at the bottom, there is a wetland located just off site down here that does impact this piece. There's fairly limited use of this piece. When you incorporate the buffer and the wetland, they will be able to probably provide just a very small amount of parking and would provide access to 68th Avenue West in this location. One last thing on this I'd like to point out, because I highlighted it in red here. This is slightly different code language than what they proposed in their application. So I'd like to just discuss what that means. In their application, basically it read that accessory surface parking and underground parking structures may be located on parcels zoned R1 when the R1 zone properties are part of a project site and that parking is accessory to a permitted use on a parcel zone mixed use urban 75. By adding an adjoining parcel zone mixed use 75, it limits the expansion of their project site up in this area here. So by requiring the R1 zone parcel to be adjoining the mixed use 75 to be able to be used for parking, it would prevent them essentially from purchasing these properties in this area and potentially expanding their project site.
For parking.
For parking, correct. And once again, yeah, that would only be for parking because that's still zoned R1. It's not for additional, buildings. Now that would not, one thing with that is that would not preclude all of the R1 zone parcels along this area here because as you notice here, we've got 3 pieces right in this location here that do abut the mixed use urban 75 there would be a possibility that I guess you could expand in that location. I kind of consider it a low probability for several reasons. They've looked at layouts to where they have enough parking to meet their needs on what they would be purchasing. So purchasing extra property just for parking is generally not a good financial choice. And also whether or not these properties are even for sale. The other thing to consider is it's really tough with trying to get too specific on what you can allow here. If you, I guess, tighten the screws a little too much, you might break something and turn it into more of a spot zone. And so we feel this is a good balance to at least, alleviate any concerns of expanding the project site up in this location here. Now, one final thing to follow up, and then I'll be open for any questions. I would like to also talk a little bit about where the Planning Commission over the next year is doing the Northeast Business District Sub-Area Plan. At that time, one of the considerations during that time, although this process will take probably over a year to do, there will be some consideration or analysis done by the Planning Commission on just the overall zoning in this area and whether or not it makes sense that these R1 parcels kind of exist in this area when they are abutted essentially by commercial on all sides, a park on the south, and commercial all along the west side, and then a major arterial along one side. So in future consideration, although that is not the proposal we have in front of us, because we can't guarantee one way or the other on obviously which way any of that would go, but I just wanted to point that out, that there is over the next year, as we do this Northeast sub-area plan, we will be looking at whether or not it makes sense to rezone that. And that was at the direction of both the Planning Commission and the City Council to not make any changes to our R1 zones at the time that we went through the form-based code, and to look at some potential zoning changes in the future during sub-area planning processes, at least to analyze those. So at that time, that concludes my report. Provided a little bit of history on how we got to where we're at, talked about the 3 amendments, and now at this point, I'm fully available to answer any questions. The applicant's here to answer any questions and get direction from the City Council moving forward. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you. We appreciate that, Mr. Bursky. And we're going to use our raised hand method for bringing the folks into the conversation, raising questions. The applicant, as Kevin just mentioned, is also available to answer questions. So you may want to, council, decide if you are addressing your question to staff or the applicant. I believe that Councilmember Belisi was the first hand I saw. So would you like to lead us off?
Kevin, remind me again, what is the R1 landscape allowance around the exterior of the R1 zone? Oh,
That is the
what's the exterior R1 landscape square footage or setback requirement?
the landscape requirement around the perimeter of this site, which would be along that, buffering the existing single family, is a level 1 20-foot wide landscape strip that consists of 2 rows of evergreen trees, approximately 7.5 feet apart, to create a solid site obscuring screen and ground cover, of course.
Okay, I noticed that one of their proposals, or one of the agreed to changes, was in the interior between the MU and the R1, reducing it from 30 to 10 feet. Could we not move that to the exterior to the R1 and provide additional landscaping buffer there instead of in the middle of the project?
The proposal to reduce from 30 feet to 10 feet is for a building setback at that location and not a landscape buffer.
Oh, okay.
So it would just be to reduce the building setback from an internal property line.
Gotcha. That makes more sense.
Yeah. And feel free, I can bring back up the picture if anybody has something specific that might help if you'd like as well.
Anything else?
No, that answered my question. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Fleming, I had you down, then followed by Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Kevin, and thanks for that presentation. And actually, it's clearer to me this time than it was the first time around, so that's great. I do have several questions, though, for you, and one has to do with the landscape buffering. So if I understood your presentation, the interior landscaping currently is 30 feet. We're looking to reduce that to 10 feet, and the exterior is 20 feet. Yet those are both but R1 properties. Why do we have a different standard for those?
Yeah, no, the internal reduction that is being proposed is for the buildings and not a landscape buffer. So right. That internal one is there. So you're not, when you're buying, when they're buying this large piece of property. There's no required buffer for interior properties within their project site. So you don't have to buffer against your own project, right?
Got it. Okay.
The buffer is required against properties outside of their project area, and we're not proposing to do any reduction there. That is under the current standard of the 20-foot wide buffer.
Okay. So that buffer you described is exactly like the buffer we have further south on 67th, where the duplexes were built right off of 67th. They put that 20-foot double row tree buffer there. If you're heading south, it's on the left-hand side, just below, I believe it's 40th. Is that correct?
Below 40
Or
44th.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the east side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first landscape buffer I ever put in here at the city back in about 2001, I think.
Okay. So that's an example. If we were looking for a visual example, that would be that setback.
That one's actually a little smaller than what's required here.
Okay.
That one, it's grown up, so it looks more full, right? But that's just one row of trees that are about 10 feet apart. You know, they're Leland cypress, and they're in about a 15-foot landscape strip. So this is 2 rows of staggered trees on a 20-foot landscape strip. But it's not a bad comparison because it gives you that sight obscuring screen that you're talking about.
Okay. And then about 6 months ago, when we talked about this project and then the project to the north of that, there was a request about a traffic mitigation plan, and was told at that time the council would actually get to see that plan. Where are we with that? I mean, we're adding a boatload more cars onto our roads, and we're not changing the lanes or anything. So is the council going to get an opportunity to see what the engineering plan on mitigating the traffic along the road system is going to be and the impact on that?
The council sure can view that. We do have the traffic impact analysis that was done for the Narrows project. If you're talking about the Narrows Urban Village project that hasn't started yet.
Yeah,
yeah.
But these projects are pretty much, take 27th Street out of it, are pretty much adjacent to each other, and I'm not so much looking at the whatever that plan was you just mentioned. I really would like to see what is, by modeling, what is the real impact on the road, so we don't end up down the road with a South Hill type problem where it's just bumper to bumper traffic all day long on the road system. So, yes. And I'm presuming that, to the wisdom of our city engineers and traffic engineers, they're looking at that and trying to determine, is that going to bring our roads to a level D, a level E, level F? And how are we mitigating that to ensure that we can keep traffic moving through the city?
Yes, that's a very, thought out question. Traffic always comes up, and I hear the concerns you have. At this point in the process, since we don't really have a proposal, we don't know the exact number of units. We have an idea what possibly can be done here. But later down the line, when a project gets more narrowed in for this site, if the changes do proceed, at that time, that is when that more detailed information comes out, gets analyzed. They're very likely, will have to be some mitigation for this, maybe a right in, right out, an additional access somewhere to provide better circulation. We are, as we move this, through the process, one of the things, we're really pushing for is kind of an east-west, connection from 67th to 69th in there. And then they also have a north connection to 27th and a south connection out the site back around to 67th. So we will, be pushing hard for those connections. And if there's, more mitigation that needs to be done on 67th, that will come out with a traffic impact analysis when we have an idea of the number of trips that will be generated by the proposal. Mm-hmm. When those traffic impact analysis are done, they also have to take into consideration things under construction. So they would have to take into consideration the Narrows project and the trips generated by that project if it's under construction.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And so thank you for that. I would like us to be ahead of that curve versus behind the curve when it comes to looking at that one. Lastly, I didn't see it on the first presentation, but you mentioned it tonight, that the parking on the proposed lot on the south end of that property down by the wetlands. Is there any plan in that initial designing that accounts for the water runoff, so it's not running into the wetlands, but we're catching it in the catch basin, or what's the plan for the surface water runoff for that?
Yeah, we do allow, yeah, there is a wetland. We haven't, we know there's a wetland there, and we know it will impact that lot that they would be purchasing, which would limit the, usability of that lot if it could be used for parking. We do not know the extent of the wetland yet until they do a wetland delineation, which at this point hasn't been done. And at that point, when the wetland's analyzed, it'll be determined, could it be used for, we do allow a discharge into wetlands if that's the natural flow of the water. Now, it has to be a regulated discharge, and it has to, it can't flood it, right? I'm going to put on an engineering hat slightly, so bear with me. I'll talk some generalities since Jack's team is who does the storm drainage reviews, but we use the King County Surface Water Design Manual or the DOE manual. Those are the ones approved by the state and the ones we've adopted. On sites such as this, what we've seen is they'll have underground vaults that will be put in, and they might, excuse me, treatment will be done in one of several ways. Sometimes with a site like this, they can use some areas in the parking lots for treatment through bioswales, or they do filter vaults. And then when those, and then the water is discharged and connected to a city system. I don't know which way the water flows. I think it would probably have to flow out to 67th, or it might flow north to 27th and connect into the city systems. Okay. So the impacts are looked at. And in general, from a site like this that is mostly gravel, but very compacted with some existing impervious surface, there's no storm drainage out there now, or very, very minimal. So we'll end up with a lot better storm system for both treatment and for capacity overall if the site gets redeveloped.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming, and Councilmember McCluskey, followed by Councilmember Wood, and then Councilmember Keel.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And that was one of the things on my bucket list, was to ask about the impacts of the traffic onto the street, and just knowing where this property aligns and going into the 27th Street and where Starbucks is in that road that merges into like 3 intersections, I would strongly suggest or look at that when the residents are coming off into 67th Street, you make it a right-hand turn only. And I believe there's a suicide lane in there too, over here, right? If I remember correctly, right? Yeah. And to probably do some mitigation onto that, because sometimes the cars travel quite quickly coming from the north going to the south. And so if I was in the suicide lane and that southbound traffic was heading towards my direction, I'd be a little nervous. So maybe doing some, however you do it. I know on Bridgeport South there is some cutouts and buffering with foliage and vegetation that can visually slow down traffic to make it a little more safer there as well. So, and just because it's in the report that came before council, are these going to have some affordable housing components in it?
There could be, but I would doubt it. I would defer that question to the applicant on that. There's no mandate. We don't have a mandate to make a certain percentage of affordable units.
Okay.
But
All right, maybe that could be a discussion later on if they have additional requests of council besides these proposals.
yes, that could, yes.
Okay, because they also noted in their report that they wanted to enhance UP's green infrastructure. And so I'm just curious what that all means. Does it mean a pocket park for the residents? What did they have in mind? So kind of outside of these, but it is in their report that they gave into the council packet. So
Yes.
That's my curiosity, because we do have a Paradise Pond that's down the road. And then also the part of the mixed use piece is to ensure that some of the retail market along 27th Street stays retail market for that mixed use component that the City Council and the Growth Management Act is so on track to grow in our city. So just curious on how that's all going to come about to limit the vacancy capacity in there. And then also in the report there, this is an ASARCO site. If there's any soil, can have contaminated soil mitigation that needs to occur. That was noted in the report that could be a strong possibility. And then the impacts on what we're talking about here as well for the amendments with that component to it. And you did a very nice job of talking about the privacy buffers to the R1 and to ensure that the landscaping stays live. You know, it doesn't dry out, it doesn't die and go away. You know, we want it to grow and be big and beautiful and green to protect the residents from the headlights, the noise, and the pollution. And that's all my comments and questions at this time.
If you'd like, I can respond to at least a couple of those very quickly.
Yes.
On the response, we do require with our storm drainage analysis, they're all required to do a low impact storm drainage design or analyze low impact development, and that's the green infrastructure piece. Not all of our soils support a low impact design, but they do have to analyze that and determine if they can do low impact development for their storm drainage. The mixed use, they are everything we've talked to them about. They are proposing, you know, a mixed use component up at the 27th Street location for the building. And the question about the ASARCO smelter, that's something that applies to the entire city. When we see a project that triggers a SEPA review, the state Department of Ecology sends us comments, and one of their comments is to go through the lead arsenic testing relating to ASARCO. So like the Narrows had to do it, and this site would have to do that as well. So it's a very common thing for our city, for sites that trigger a SEPA review, to go through that process to test the soils. We haven't had anybody have to do any mitigation yet, so it's never been at a level that's triggered anything. So that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. Excellent. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate
Very
that.
good. Thank you, Councilmember Woods. Your turn.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a question you've heard from me before, and you actually did a good job addressing in your presentation initially, which is those R1 parcels that border 67th. They're basically to the right of the blue MU1Ms, about the risk that is being assumed there. I did notice in the environmental checklist that I think it was question number 11, where they asked, do you intend to expand this parcel at all? And their answer was no. And I appreciate that, because I generally support so far these amendments, but it is really, my support is contingent to the existing footprint. If that footprint changes, I would be a lot less likely to support. And you mentioned that the customer or developers on this call as well. If I could I would just love to hear from the developer directly, if they could answer the question, Do you have any plans right now at all to expand this parcel beyond the footprint that's been described to us? Help me feel better about the risk we're assuming as a council.
Great, and I think that's a good question. Why don't we take the developer, or rather applicant questions when we're done with questions for Kevin? Would that be all right?
I can support that, whatever you think is best, Mayor.
Okay, all right, very good. Mhm.
And that is all I
anything?
have as far as questions, so thank you.
All right, great. And Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Kevin, thanks for your report. It was thorough, and I appreciate it. A lot of my questions have been asked by my colleagues, but I do want to just underscore, just so that you know, that there's yet another council member that's concerned about what was raised, the setbacks and the as well as the buffering. I think you answered the questions about the R1 on the outside and the R1 on the inside. I thought that was a great answer. I didn't want to ask about that as well. I am very concerned about traffic mitigation. When I think about Mildred, and just how busy that street already is, and if we're going to add, I don't know, they were talking 400 to 1,000 units. I've heard somewhere between that. I mean that's a lot of cars, onto that little street every day, all times of the day. I mean, I can't get my head around what that looks like, when I look at this project, with that one little R1 zone coming from their property onto Mildred, and then maybe somewhere on 27th and even on the backside of 29th. My head starts swimming when I think about, 1,000 cars at least, or somewhere in that vicinity, if there's one per unit being added to that. I cringe when I think about that. And then you put the property that's going on up north of there as well. So I'm looking at South Hill for real, like my colleagues are concerned. So I'd be really very interested in this traffic mitigation, and I hope that we get a chance to assess that and look at that before we agree to, okay, let's start putting shovels in the ground. I think we just, at least from my perspective, I'd like to have a chance to look at that. The other thing that I heard, and maybe I'm getting my projects mixed up, but I thought and I didn't hear it tonight, but I thought I heard it in other presentations that, and maybe this is a question for later on with the applicant, but I thought that there was some interest in some tax abatement, perhaps for this process. And so I didn't hear that tonight. And so, of course, that's a whole different conversation and that we'd have to have with them. But I would like to at least know if that is on the table as a request. I didn't hear it tonight, and I thought it is. And my interest is to get all the whole requests out on the table so that we're not getting surprised with little bits and pieces as things go along. So I just want to make sure that if that's a part of the case, that we let's put that out there. And the last question I have is, and I can't remember it's the Opportunity Zone PSRC. We worked for a long time to get that designation.
Regional Growth Center.
Regional Growth Center. How did I forget that? Right. So I know. Well, I'm going to ask a question. Is this in the Regional Growth Center, or is the Regional Growth Center everything in the northeast corner on the other side of 27th?
This is in the Regional Growth Center.
Okay, right. So then I'm wondering if we've given some thought to the impacts to that. I mean, both from a positive standpoint in the city, as well as from maybe if there is a negative standpoint in the city. I can imagine it would be, but I'm just thinking of how all that plays into that Regional Growth Center piece too as well.
Any comments at this point, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments to that. yes, there has been a request for MFTE for multifamily tax exemption that we've had some initial discussions with the applicant, and they excuse me, put in an email wanting that. We don't have a formal like application process for that. What we've done it with before, we've taken that to City Council for consideration. We've refined the proposal much further to be able to come before the City Council to ask to potentially add this area to that map. So there would be another touch with the City Council. However, like you had mentioned, it is a separate, it's a separate process. It's a separate request. We wanted to present this to the council to see if there is support for these 3 amendments before even going to that request. On the regional growth center question, it is part of the regional growth center, and in our regional growth center, as you know, we adopted the form-based code. We added and eliminated density to allow for more housing options in there. We placed those areas up and down our arterial streets. These sort of redevelopment projects wouldn't have happened without, the council's willingness to support the form-based code. We wouldn't even be here tonight having this discussion. So I'd want to maybe analyze it a little bit more on your question, but I think for all intents and purposes, these sort of redevelopments as they occur, I think would be looked positively by Puget Sound Regional Council as we're allowing some of the growth they want us to allow, and we're doing it in a manner taking into consideration traffic on where it goes, allowing more housing, which, as we're all hearing, we're in deficiency of in the region. So just a quick thought on that anyway.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, very good. Well, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I think it's my turn, and then we'll move to the question for the applicant, and if they have any quick statements as well. So one of those items I had is on the amendment number 3, I think it was. Kevin, you had pointed out that there was some language added, and I wasn't clear if that came from the Planning Commission, came from staff. What was the source of that new language? Mm-hmm.
That was staff. After the Planning Commission, when it was brought up with a concern about that after the first meeting with the City Council, we thought of a way to try to, I guess, add some language that might be an option for the council to consider to eliminate some of the chance to expand the project area. That proposed language, which is just basically 2 words, it was discussed with the applicant, though, as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
To no objection, for not to speak for them, but they, at the time when we met with them and presented it, they did not have an objection, to that language.
Good, thank you. In the environmental determination of non-significance, the Department of Ecology made a couple of comments. One of them was about the history of the Nosarko plume, and it's in our region. Another one was requesting a phase 1 environmental review and a phase 2 environmental review. That so far hadn't been in the determination of non-significance. Have you decided whether you will be including a phase 1 and a phase 2?
I might be able to help answer this question. David Swindale, Deputy Director, Community Economic Development. Typically, the phase 1 and phase 2 studies are not something that the city typically requires. We would ask them to look at the soil contamination associated with Nosarko if this was a site that had not been disturbed. Those are the areas that typically have the built-up contamination. The phase 1 and phase 2 are typically lenders' requirements, and they would have to do them before they would able to get the financing to construct the project. But typically, we don't require phase 1 or phase 2 requirements.
Yeah, in their comments, I think the Department of Ecology talked about some of the historic uses there and some likelihoods of concern. And if they were to be on the lending market, I would imagine that a commercial lender would indeed want to be clear about that.
That's
I guess I have no idea how it's being financed. It just seems like quite a large project, and one would assume that there's some lending someplace taking place. Let's see. And I see the council, or rather Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa's hand is up. I'll go there in just a second. And I think those were my questions that remained. So
one thing might help clarify, because you've referenced, sorry to interrupt, Mayor. So the SEPA the environmental checklist that was provided that you have in your packet is just related to these text amendments. It's kind of a check the box thing we have to go through anytime we do a text amendment relating to zoning. Just remember, they will be going through a project specific environmental checklist. That's where a lot of those more detailed, the traffic impact analysis, any soils requirements, any of that stuff comes into play when you actually have a proposed project before you allow them to get a shovel in the ground.
well, thank you for that clarification. So it's a non-project SEPA as opposed to a project-specific SEPA, and there's seldom that the paperwork causes a whole lot of environmental impact, which essentially we have a environmental review on our paper project. So on our paper amendment. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, did you have something to add or question?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, in relation, in reference to traffic mitigation and traffic concerns, seems like there's a lot of concerns, and I have those as well from the council members. So one thing that I'm not clear, and that's where maybe some of these concerns come from, is normally you get the traffic mitigation, you talk it over, and the developer then does what the traffic mitigation or mitigation that is done between staff and the developer. Is there, help me out with the process, is there room for that to come back to council, not for approval, but to be given a what was the results of the traffic mitigation or mitigations or negotiations that occurred between staff and developer? Just help me out with the process a little bit more as to, you know, our ability to, you know, before, as someone said, you know, before the project starts and is approved, that we have a clear understanding where this traffic is going to flow.
Yeah. So generally traffic impact analysis, as you're probably aware, for projects, we don't bring them back to the city council. At that point, you know, the council has already adopted their you know, the street designations, their adopted levels of service, you know, the adopted codes relating to SEPA and requirements. So it's at a project staff level at that point. However, you know, it comes in with the State Environmental Policy Act as part of that checklist very early on in a process, is when they have to provide that traffic impact analysis. So we do not issue the SEPA determination until we have a traffic impact analysis that tells us all the impacts and tells us what mitigation is needed for that impact. And then those mitigation measures, depending on what they are put into the SEPA determination. At that time, it's an open public process. We'd be happy to bring back and present to the council and discuss with you and show you what has been provided with the traffic impact analysis.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot as to where we may be able to, you know, get a picture of what's going to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Well, we do have the applicant available. Councilmember Wood had a specific question for them, and I wanted to invite a representative up, so to speak, to address that question. We have about 10 minutes, maybe just a little bit longer. And I'd like to keep us within our projected time, which is the next item coming up at 8 o'clock. Councilmember Keel, did you have something quickly?
Yes, I had a question for the applicant, a couple of questions for the applicant.
All right. Well, let's get the, is there an applicant representative available for us? And good chance to come forward if there is. And I'd start with Councilmember Wood's question, and Councilmember Wood, you may want to restate that just to bring that all back in line, and then we'll go to Councilmember Keel. Following.
Certainly. Is the applicant on? I don't see one.
We should have Andrew Langsford was on. If he wants to turn on his camera, and then also Jack McCullough. There he is. Jack.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Very much appreciate your willingness to answer questions. And I think you heard my question before, but I'll just restate it. The zoning amendment changes, generally speaking, I support what you want to do and to support the project. But I would like to get.
Muted my mic. And
I'm sorry, was somebody?
That's Andy Langsford, who's the applicant. He may be having a mic issue.
Okay, got it. All right.
And
okay.
if he is, I'm happy. This is Jack McCullough, by the way. I'm Andy's lawyer. I am. As a rule council member, I always like give my client the opportunity to answer first. Usually that's a safer thing for me to do. We'll see if Andy can, but I'm happy to respond if Andy, can you?
I'm here. Can you see me?
Can't see you, but we can hear you.
We can hear you.
I wonder why. Yeah,
that's okay. But you heard the question, so.
I'm just looking.
So everyone can hear me, but you can't see me.
Yes.
That's okay.
I am looking for reassurance that your project will sit within the existing footprint as described to us. I feel like I keep talking over you. Or can I? Is there a time delay?
You know, I think there is, Council Member Wood. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. All right.
Okay.
I'm going to talk. The question I'm trying to ask is, I would just like a reassurance that the project footprint that has been described here to us tonight, that you have no current plans on changing that footprint, because really, my approval or willingness to approve the changes to the zoning amendments really relies on it sticking with this original footprint. I don't want to see it expand towards those other R1 properties on 67th. Can I get that reassurance from you?
Yes. Yeah, I think if it's really important to the council that we don't make the project larger. Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, so I mean, our relationship with the city is very important to us. And if that really is important, then absolutely yes. I mean, we don't want to hurt the chances of doing this project. We spent a lot of time, money, and resources to get to this point. So if it is important, I mean, in all truthfulness, we have had neighbors who have reached out to us because they want to be a part. One neighbor in particular, but again, if the council doesn't want that, that's okay.
Let me clarify, because what I'm not interested in is the zoning amendment changes expanding if you expand the project. So for example, if neighbors want to sell you property and you want to develop that additional property, honestly, I don't have a problem with that. I just don't want to see it turn into a parking lot along 67th. I prefer that be turned into something more useful, like a mixed use retail or something that'd be more appropriate. I think, do you understand where I'm going with this?
Oh, absolutely. And we agree with you, actually. We've talked with city staff about this exact thing. And we wouldn't want that either. If we're developing a project, we want to bring a sense of place and a community and something that is attractive, not something that's a parking lot.
Thank you. That's the reassurance I was looking for.
Andy, I might just add too, as Kevin pointed out, council member, the council is going to have an opportunity to go through a sub-area planning process here for this area. And that would be another reason to wait, right, and see what the council's sort of planning vision for this area would be, Andy, before, doing anything else. So, and we know that's on the horizon, right? So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here to answer our questions. Um, from the outset of this project, that when I've heard it, I've heard units going from anywhere from 400 units to 1,000 units, and anywhere somewhere in between. And so I'm curious as to how you're going to go through your process to figure out how many units you want to put on that property, and are you leaning toward a number now?
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Keel. And yes, we are. Currently, we are highly leaning towards the 373 unit project, which is the smaller version. As we've talked, I'm a long-term thinker, and I see down the road the potential to build more units. That's partly why we're looking at making sure that we have the 75-foot height limit. I mean, we have, just to talk on the size of the project and the size of the property, it's over 7 acres, which is actually over 5.5 football fields. So just to put it in perspective, it's a big piece of property here that we're looking at developing. And from a traffic side, we'll absolutely go through all those, the process to make sure that, you know, we're following that. But there's 3 rows on each side that should very much help with the traffic impact. But yeah, we're definitely looking at the smaller project right now, and we think the bigger project will probably be in a few decades. But I mean, the comp plan does, and the growth that's happening, I think there is a need for housing.
Great. So just to follow up with that, so the thought is that the smaller number now, and then maybe decade from now, add to that additional units to that same property.
Exactly, or further, a decade and a half, or even longer than that.
Okay, great. So my I guess now is my third question. How will you determine impact for traffic for that area? How are you going? What's your thought process to thinking about traffic, and what is that all about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like I mentioned, relationship. I think it's important to have a good relationship with the city. So I mean, we'll have to definitely do the traffic studies, which will be important in determining what will make sense. And also, just on the road side, we've already budgeted having to put a light based on what our civil mentioned to us, that there's a good chance that a light's going to be needed at the front. So I mean, we're prepared to do what we need to be a good citizen, and make the necessary changes. You know, it's a partnership, it's a relationship. That's how I've always been, and that's how we're going to approach this: is bring a great development to the city. And you know, we don't want to be getting calls and to have the name of, oh, they're the ones who brought, you know, a terrible project and they made traffic back up. We don't want to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you for the answer. And I do want to tell you both that as a council member, I'm very excited about your project. And I hope that we can work through everything that we need to work through to actually get it built in UP. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, very good. And Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, you have a question or a comment?
Okay, I'm on. So thank you, Mayor. This is Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, and it's more of a comment, and that is, Mr. Lansford, in council, as you know, we went through excruciating pain, and we still are, about how we have achieved the regional designation under the Puget Sound Regional Council for growth. It hasn't been an easy task, and certainly we've gone to a lot of decision-making, policy decisions to how we see growth in our city, and especially around our main arterials like 67th, 27th, and so forth. We actually just recently did the area planning, sub-area planning. And so we have really gotten to the point where rubber meets the road, and that is who's going to come. You know, we made policy decisions, and hoping that if we did all this and accepted the original designation and monies to help us with infrastructure, that we would actually attract someone to our area. And that was part of our discussion. Would anybody would come to UP to invest? And so and we are seeing it, not just even before Mr. Lansford's project. We've seen it throughout our city where people are coming in to invest. And certainly, I want to just comment that we appreciate your wanting to come into University Place and take a really good look and kick the tires. I'm glad that our zoning and our location is a desirable one for you to invest millions into our city. And I hope that at the end of the day, your proposal passes SIPA and traffic mitigation and everything else that goes along with this process. And good to see, multi-family housing, which is, like we all know, is in the national news. There's not enough. And so we're happy to be able to be actually getting what we wanted, and that is investors that would do this for, in our city. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. And gentlemen, I think we've just about reached our time for this evening. I think we've had a good discussion. I appreciate you being here and helping add to that. I do think there's like 2 minutes or so if you wanted to just have a final word or not. I'll leave that to you, but if so, please keep it to about 2 minutes and we'll move to our next item.
Absolutely. No, I would love to, Mayor Worthington. And first, we appreciate everybody's time and thank you so much. And I'll just share and probably give Jack a minute as well, but I'll just say thank you. We really hope that everything passes. We worked really hard with the city to come up with something that we feel is win-win, and worked hard with the city staff as well to come up with this with these amendments, and think it really fits in well with the city and what the city is looking to do with those parcels and get that redeveloped.
And I would only add, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Andy. Your staff has done an exemplary job here. It's been a great relationship. And Kevin, to your point, you raised this additional language to us when we met, and we agreed. It makes complete sense. So just for the record, I wanted to endorse that as well, the additional 2 words that you had.
Very good. Well, thank you. And I'm glad to have you with us tonight. I think Kevin has a comment as well, and then we'll move to the next item. Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of summarize and follow up. Then we would, it sounds like we have some, at least consensus to bring forth a ordinance for consideration with the 3 proposed amendments. Do I have some consensus with the optional 2 words that I added? Would you like that in the ordinance? Okay, then we'll keep it with just that one option, and for discussion at a soon upcoming meeting. I don't have a date for it, but at the next possible one, we'll bring it back then. Thank you for consideration.
Very good.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate a productive hour here in the discussion. Got us ready to move on. And with that, we're going to start talking about our next item having to do with our ARPA funding and potentials for that, a report that's been in the making for a while. And Becky Metcalf is here to help us with that. Becky, looks like you may be ready.
I am. Thank you, Mayor. And Amanda, could you pull up the PowerPoint, please? Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I'm Becky Metcalf, the Business Outreach Liaison for the city. And I'm also a part of the internal team that has been looking at options for fund that we could fund programs with for our ARPA money. And I've been asked to lead this discussion. So I'd like to start with a real quick overview of kind of what ARPA is and where we've come so far. As you recall, ARPA was a $350 billion set aside by the federal government the American Rescue Plan of 2021, funds to be distributed throughout the country to assist communities in dealing with the impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. The funds must be allocated by the end of 2024, and they must be spent by the end of 2026. And University Place received approximately $9.4 million of this funding package. Next slide. So there were 5 areas that the funding outlined that this money could be used for. And our internal team has been looking at ways to help with point 2, addressing negative impacts, economic impacts caused by the public health emergency. So for ease of discussion, our potential uses are divided into 2 categories: human services and business assistance. Next slide. We presented last time on November 15th, I believe it was, kind of a lay of the land for human services assistance. And we reported at that time that many University Place renters have already applied for and received assistance. Currently, there are many funding opportunities available to our individuals and families seeking assistance. And we have also provided links to funding assistance from Pierce County, Tacoma Public Utilities, and the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department on the city's COVID-19 resource webpage. Next slide. Also in 2020, the city provided 2 rounds of assistance in both July and November. And at that time, we were able to assist over 70 families to the tune of close to $180,000. Next slide. For business assistance as well, we offered 2 rounds of grants in both July and November. At that time, we were able to assist 89 unique businesses to the total of right close to $700,000. Next slide. On November 15th, our team was asked to continue to do some research and possibly present some potential options of programs that the city could use should the council wish to provide some assistance. And so what we decided to do is to take a deeper dive into what we feel the need is in the community, both for human services and business as well. So I want to share with you a little bit of what we did and the results that we found. In the area of human services, we did a poll of the 15 childcare providers in University Place. Of the 15 providers that were contacted, 3 responded. 1 responded that additional resources would be useful, and 2 expressed a desire to expand their services. All 3 shared that their facilities are running at maximum attendance. We also were able to find that Pierce County in their 2022 budget approved $500,000 for funding for childcare resources. And Pierce County also dedicated $2 million in CARES Act funding to childcare, which was invested in a voucher system for families and relief grants for providers. Next slide. On the business end of things, we decided to conduct a quick survey with SurveyMonkey to determine whether a program reimbursing employers for a hiring bonus and or childcare assistance would be beneficial. We ran 2 weeks of this survey. The initial week was December 6th through 13th. We received a minimal response at that time, and so we opened the survey for 1 more week, January 7th through 12th. Of those 2, we received 25 total responses, 19 in the first week and an additional 6 in the second. We were able to determine that 2 of the responses appeared to come from the same business, and interestingly enough, the responses were in opposition of each other, so that kind of canceled each other out. Next slide. So the two questions we asked were very simple. The first one was, what would you find a program that reimburses you for paying a hiring bonus to new employees who were previously unemployed beneficial? And so 52% of our respondents said yes, they would. And that's 13 out of 25. And question 2 was, would you find a program that provides partial funding for new employee childcare expenses beneficial in your efforts to recruit employees? And the percentage response there was 60% said yes. And again, I'd like to point out that's 15 out of 25. I mean, when you look at the percentages, it might be impressive, but when we look at the total number of responses, it was fairly minimal. We also had a third question where we allowed people to make comments or any other suggestions they may they would find useful. We only received 7 comments. 3 of them basically said, we don't know what the issue is hiring is, but we're not sure that this would help. There was one that said, yes, possibly, and the other 2 were fairly non-responsive to the question. Next slide. So based on this additional research we've done and a lot of discussion with our internal team, we've got a couple of recommendations that we'd like to put forward. First of all, for human services, we feel that due to the broad base of resources available already, we're not recommending any new city-run programs or funding at this time. As far as business assistance, also due to the availability of other resources, a questionable level of demand and uncertainty related to future needs between now and 2024, when the funds have to be allocated, staff recommends that the city hold the funds to be earmarked for business assistance. And we further recommend that research continue to be conducted on potential needs in order to refine a program that may be beneficial under the ARPA guidelines. So at this point, I'd like to pause. Those are our recommendations, and maybe give this back to council for further discussion. If you're interested, we do have the outline of a couple of programs that I can present to you. But at this point, I thought you might want to discuss these recommendations.
Well, Becky, thank you very much. And I think I may have some hands here. I do. So we can turn to Councilmember Fleming as a place to start, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, and then Councilmember Wood. So, Councilmember Fleming, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Becky, thank you for that presentation and the information. It's part of it's is rewarding, part of it's disheartening with regards to the number of responses. But I know in the past, when we survey the city and we get low responses, I'm often told that a 1% or less response is still considered good when we do surveys. So I'm not discouraged by those numbers. The thing that I am concerned about is when I did have a chance to talk to some staff regarding what are the options for businesses. You know, I'm a firm believer that the small businesses in our community is the backbone of our community, and we should always continue to look at ways in which we can help those remain stable, grow, stay in our community, and not leave it. And I know there's been some conversation about we'll go to the county to their training programs and help the small businesses through the training programs. I can tell you from firsthand experiences there, if the city even remotely considers those programs, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money and resources. Because the small businesses that are here don't really need to learn how to start a business. What they need to have is how do you sustain the business and how do you keep it in this community? We've had since the last round of funding, we've had roughly a 25% growth of businesses in the city. And while we supported our businesses we had before, I hope as we go forward, and granted we've got other priorities in the city, but hopefully we can allocate something to those 25% new businesses so that they will stay in the city. And I don't know what that funding would look like. or what it would go for. I think that's a conversation to be continued. But certainly look at ways to keep those new businesses anchored in this community and then allow us to grow from there. So, my request is, as we go through checking these boxes and looking at things, is that we keep in mind that while we've helped a lot of our businesses, we also have new businesses coming on board in the city, and we should look at how do we support those businesses during this time. So with that, thank you again, really, for a great presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Good, Councilmember Fleming. And now, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to jump on Councilmember Fleming's comments on the county. You've heard me before. I'm not a believer. I'm not a proponent of passing our monies to the county. And we need to be creative in how we use it internally. That being said, I just think we really have to go outside the box. And when Councilmember Fleming, when you were mentioning the small businesses as the backbone, we all know that. And how do we keep them in retention? We were focusing on employees, but maybe we should be thinking about business retention, which is part of the game. But can this money, if we could give it to the county to help our businesses, why couldn't we hire consultants to help the small businesses for marketing and longevity and how to stay in business in UP and how to grow their business UP? I'm not sure if that money can be used for that, but if it can be, I mean, that's one way. Training. Seminars that can be people that come in and they can come in and go to those or one-on-one. I mean, this is significant enough money where you can hire, personal trainers for businesses to really go in one-on-one in their business and really help them with where to go for resources and really key in what resources. So many resources are out there, but this small businesses don't have time to go and apply and figure out which is best for their niche. But a consultant maybe will say, listen, out of this 50 resources, here's 2 that really fit like a glove for you. Thus, that's what I'm thinking. We hopefully, maybe if the money can be used for that, we should, do that. It's not we have to design our own program. We hire with that money, and I think that money would be legitimate use. So anyway, that being said, I really believe that back to the retention, the hiring bonuses. I don't think we're making this up. This is not unique to UP. This is nationally, okay, everywhere, regionally, nationally, where people are having a heck of a time keeping labor. And not only retention, people are quitting for other jobs. People are having a hard time coming on board, even for a short period of time. I still believe that we might not have gotten the best response that we were looking for or expecting from our businesses, but I still, based on when I go out there and I'm talking to small businesses, labor shortage is a huge one, and that goes with Whole Foods down the line to a small service. And I was just giving an example. I went in Whole Foods the other day and went to the deli. It was closed, huge deli, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I went to the information counter where the managers work. And I said, why is the deli closed? He says, labor shortage. I said, are they sick? They got COVID. He says, no, it's just labor shortages. Okay, so I really believe money talks. I don't care who I don't need a survey to tell me that money talks. People love to have their bonuses. You see signs everywhere. It says bonuses. I go to Lakewood and you see the school district say $3,500 sign-in bonus for essential workers. So I still believe that there's something there that we need to really dig out, but I really think we need to do more. On a whole different note, on this subject matter is, and I'm speaking to my colleagues, and that is, this presentation was all about the business assistance and so forth, but we have this pocket of money that we received, but we have not yet approved any portion of it. We talked about the 6 million for sewer infrastructure. We talked about some monies being for city types of IT services and things like that, and maybe some reserves. And there's this pocket of money that arbitrarily we talked about, you know, the 700,000 or so, because that's what we had done before, and it seems like reasonably to look at it this time. I would like to at least make a decision as a council on the rest. If we say, okay, if we decided on the 6 million for the sewer infrastructure and something for IT or whatever it is, we should. I hope we can come to be able to approve the allocations for those, specifically like the sewer, because I think at least next year or this year there is some work that can be done towards, okay, like working with the county. What do we have to work with the county on sewers and in University Place? I don't think the staff can really go to them if we have not approved anything. So I like to see us move forward in approving and allocating funds out of this, whatever we have that we were given, so that we can move on and excuse me for rambling here, but basically just to move on with the allocation of these funds. And then if we can't make a decision on the business assistance, but maybe allocate, let's say the 700, whatever we decide, and we wait to really specifically allocate them to what they're going to be used for. Thank you, Mayor.
Excuse me. Councilmember Wood, your turn.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple of comments here. First, Becky, thank you for doing the research because answering the questions we had raised last time. And it actually does, I'd have a concern about the childcare one, only in that if you're giving childcare to new employees, there'd be a certain fairness issue with somebody else who's already hired. And that could become problematic. Not saying we can't do something, but I could see it becoming problematic. And Javier, I think you just answered one of the questions I was going to have, because she had talked about earmarked money for business. Were we talking about 700,000 roughly? Has anything been decided on that, or is that just a discussion point?
Just a discussion point.
Discussion point. Got it. Okay, so we didn't have a set dollar value for that then. So in short, I agree with your conclusions, which for the business allocation, whatever that is, that we pause on that until we get a better idea of where it should go. But I actually totally agree with what Javier was bringing up, which is if we can start movement on other projects, why don't we? I think that'd be a great idea. Sewer especially, if we can come up with an allocation for that and start movement, I think that would be a really good idea. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Very good, Councilmember Wood. Councilmember Fleming, something else to add?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I too just want to again reiterate the issue with the small businesses in our community. I think Javier certainly hit the nail on the head for some of those issues that are up there. I don't support the training piece again, because that doesn't really help businesses. I can tell you from again, personal experience with that one. But I do like the idea of grants in looking at grants for retention. As you pointed out, Javier, you go into businesses, they're dying on the vine to find employees because they just don't have the resources within their businesses to keep those employees. The second thing, just to put a kind of a bug in the council's ear, is, you know, we may even consider help with some of the startup costs with these new businesses. You know, when I started my first business in University Place 25 years ago, the cost for me to start a business in UP was $75. All I had to do was buy a city license and I was in business. Today, that price tag can range anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 before you even open the doors. That is a barrier to small business. So, in the conversation, we ought to consider, I'm not saying a total grant to fund all of that, but at least maybe a partial grant of whatever amount the council thinks reasonable to help offset some of those expenses, to help these businesses, again, get off the ground and stay stable. When I talk to the number of business people who opened their doors and closed after they started here, was because they started out with good intentions, but they dug themselves in a hole with the cost of just starting a business in this city, and then they couldn't get out of it. So, as we continue the dialogue, I think number one, first and foremost, is keep a focus on those businesses, and then the dialogue on how we best support them. Whether it's through daycare, whether it's the grants for retention, whether it's grants for startup, or maybe it's a combination of all the above. I don't know, but certainly would support that conversation versus over hiring consultants for advising people what to do.
Okay.
And that's all I've got.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. I'm going to take a turn here just to throw something in the mix. If I may, and Becky, you and I had chatted about this a little bit previously. I think you told me that we've done other surveys using a SurveyMonkey or a similar tool. And how many responses do we typically get?
The last time we did a survey that we sent out to all businesses was in October, using the same list of 606 names, and we had 89 responses.
89 versus 25. Okay. So it might have been the time of year, maybe it's the issues, maybe who knows what it is, but that's not very indicative. That's not the amount of responses we usually get, and that's curious in itself. It is such an odd time in our world. It's hard to know, frankly, but nonetheless, it's very different than we've had before. And we sent it out twice, and still came back. That was the max. So I don't know that we're hitting on themes that are getting the business person's attention. Indeed, the small business is the backbone for our community and many communities. And I too started a small business, several of them decades ago. But and it's a struggle. But you work your way through that, hopefully successfully, and sometimes not. And to the extent we can do something there to help, I'm certainly interested in trying to find that help. It is a challenge, though, in a couple of ways. So one of the things we had talked about was expanding our information set in two ways, and I wanted to bring this up with council while the discussion is relatively early. One is, what if we go to the Economic Development Board and ask them, which we just haven't had the opportunity to do at this point, what their ideas are? What do they hear from their fellow businesses in the UP? Where's the need? And dialogue with them and charge that, I said board, but I meant commission, charge that commission with that task to bring that back to us. They have a meeting coming up in about a week, and maybe some opportunity there or after a subsequent meeting. Additionally, we could also use flash vote and tailor our questions more about why people, are they looking for work? Why not? I mean, I'm not exactly sure what our questions are, but flash vote can help us fine tune those a bit. But it's a tool that we have available. It isn't just the business community, it's our residents. And so the questions need to be asked a little different way, but we may find some useful information there as well. So I wanted to float those ideas out. The Mayor Pro Tem and I had discussed that in the previous meeting as an addition. Then I think it's also time to move forward with things we know we want to do and put some money aside while we try and dissect this problem. I would hate to make a choice that didn't give a return on that investment. And the other thing, so if we didn't make exactly the right strategic decision here, there's a limited opportunity for us. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to figure out what that strategic decision is. We also have some limitations we did not have last time, and that does make this one tougher to find business support or provide business assistance in order to stay within the lines and the auditing responsibilities that go with that. So we just kind of have to recognize, yeah, it's different, and we can't quite duplicate what we did before. But we'd all certainly like to help our businesses. I have also spoken to local businesses, and I know at least one, actually several, that the doors are open today because of the services the city made available, year and a half, 2 years ago. The money the city made available a year and a half, 2 years ago. That's great. This is today, and we still have needs and issues. We just need to figure out the right way to approach it here. So, wanted to put a couple of things on the table for discussion, talk about some of our constraints, I suppose, and thank you for listening to me. With that, I think Councilmember Keel is next up.
Great, thank you, Mayor. You hit on two of the points that I wanted to raise, and just to underscore them. One is, and a lot of people have said that, I'm interested in putting that money for business aside until we can figure out what's the best way to spend it. And I know that's staff recommendation. That just makes total sense to me. I'm very much interested in finding out what exactly it is, whatever the it is, that we can give to the business, because it's there. I just think we haven't, for some whatever reason, we haven't discovered it yet. And so it's going to be just a combination of doing a bunch of stuff. The surveys, the flash vote. I really like your idea, and I was going to raise it as well, bringing in the Economic Development Commission. I mean, that's what they're there for. I think we write a resolution and we give it to them that directs them to do exactly what it is that we want. I mean, they're the ones, and then tell them we've got X $100,000 that we want to give to businesses. How often does that happen? And so that we really want to use our city manager's phrase. We want to put our crowbar in the right space, all right, and make sure that we can leverage these dollars. That's what I'm really excited about going forward. The other thing that's really kind of sticking in my craw a bit, and Councilmember Fleming always reminds me of it, and it's what does it cost to do business in UP? And I opened a small business in UP many years ago, and I think it was $60 for my license. But I had a consulting business, and it was out of my house, and every week I would get on a plane and fly to somewhere else in the world and consult and then come back. But because it was basic, I had to have that thing. So there was a lot of other stuff that you had to pay, and so I'm hoping that for businesses like the one I had, those dollars are still relatively low. And then you take that to a business that someone may want to have, a brick and mortar business or something like that, or some kind of facility. Now that may get into the tens of thousands of dollars. Now, what my notion is that a lot of those dollars have to do with stuff they got to pay to the county. But I think that's it, but I'm not sure. I mean, I can't get my head around that someone's paying, $20,000 to the city of UP to do business like that. I mean, so Becky, I don't know the answer to those questions. I mean, somebody may do, but I really would love to have that answered. And maybe that's something that economic development can do too as well. It's like, what does it cost to open a business in our city, and then have classes of business? from a home business to, you want to open something in the town center, and then there's a bunch of stuff in between. I really would love to know what that cost is. So anyway, those are my comments. Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Keel and Councilmember McCluskey.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I concur with going forward with some of the ARPA funding that we are, as a council, had a strong consensus on, and that's to follow through with the sewer projects. The other aspect of it is, even after COVID, there's going to be a child care need for expansion and to look at the businesses to encourage more child care facilities, especially for before and after care, and also for the little ones, the infants to 5-year-olds. There's a huge need for that, the younger age group, to get people back to work, which is strategic to what probably some of the businesses are feeling concurrently. With COVID hitting, there's a lot of retirees that happened. They're moving on, right? And the population, the candidate pool to replace them isn't quite as large. It's not, and also the trained candidates that are needed to fill these positions are not there as well. So I think for the city just to provide a incentive for hiring bonuses, we will need to think about that aspect as well, because we could provide the businesses with all the incentive monies that they want, but if there isn't a candidate to replace it or the capacity of what they need, then they'll have to realign their businesses and look at what it will take to sustain themselves in that aspect of it. Maybe they'll have to, maybe what's more, instead of an incentive, is a way to demonstrate to the businesses, and I'm sure Whole Foods probably has professionals in that regards, but some of the smaller ones to look at their circle of influence and see how they could pull viable candidates that would be interested in working for their businesses. I think the smaller businesses, are a real niche, and they maybe need to look at some of the benefits and livable wage options to encourage people to come on board once again. With the smaller candidate pool, the employees have the potential employees have the leverage to go where they can get the best hourly rate. And it doesn't, if they get a bonus, so what? It's the hourly rate that's going to sustain them over long term and time, and what can they do with that job? What sort of opportunities are within that job? Maybe there's some incentives that an employer could use this money for, not so much as retention, but as leverage to gain more knowledge base within its own organization. So it's not, I would like to explore before providing our businesses money to understand where the best process is to leverage our funds, not to just say, here's funding for you to go and attract employees. But I do know if our city is interested in expanding child care services, that was a huge need before COVID. I can guarantee you it's a huge need now, and it's a huge need in our future to grow our capacity if we want to develop economically within our city limits for people that live, work, and play within those city limits. That's what our visioning is about. Working in the school district, our schools classrooms there's probably a quarter to a third of the kids per class that are absent because they may not have COVID, but they're quarantined. I was in a little kindergarten class that's supposed to have 22 kids. I ended up with 15. 3 of those 15 kids got pulled that day because they were in a reading group that were exposed to the COVID. And so that pulls the teacher out as well. So now you lost the learning resource center teacher, and so where are you going to get them? So the schools are hurting pretty dramatically as well. Looking not only how can we help our small businesses, but also what happens if they are quarantined? How can we get that parent back to work? For example, if the child is quarantined, the parent may be able to go back to work sooner than the child if there's a household of 2 or more kids, because their quarantine doesn't work concurrently, it abuts. So that means the child that enters with COVID into the household is quarantined 5-10 days. After there's no symptoms, that kid can go back to school, but then the other kid or kiddos, they have to be quarantined for 5 to 10 days and have a negative COVID test prior to entry to the school. And so that is a big quandary, and we know that's greatly impacting not only employment but our children's education as well. Thanks.
Indeed, those are our times, and that may be part of our issue, certainly with employment. So we're going around a second time. Councilmember Wood.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick points. First, and this is getting back into the more research required, but I do like what Stan and Kent were talking about and looking at costs of starting a business. And I'd like to add to that a little bit time. And this is maybe running down a rabbit hole a little bit, but how long does it take to, say, start a restaurant and get through the Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department's process for approval? And because we all know time costs money as well, even if it's not a specific fee. But if they have to wait 3 to 6 months to get an approval, and I don't know what they have to wait, but that hurts. That's another obstacle that if there's some way to look at that, and I would love to get that information as well. And with that, again, within the legal uses of the funds, because there's, we'd have to draw it up carefully. There's a way to incentivize filling vacant storefronts. I would love to find a way to do that. And that concludes my comments for my second time around. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Javier Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to, as you're needing heads to nod for you to give direction for the next round, and that is, I do support some kind of an extra surveying through flash vote to extend our knowledge about maybe what's needed out there. The other one is I support is going to Economic Development Commission, but we need a resolution. Hopefully the next time we meet with the resolutions with very specific, what we're looking for. I think we need to define what is it that this council is wanting from the commission to look into. Some of the things that Wood and Keel and Fleming talked about is an extension of that, but it's definitely specifically around the business retention. The other one would be that a resolution to finalize the allocation of some of those funds. Hopefully, what I'm seeing, there's some nods that we should go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Excuse me, Councilmember Belisi.
I've appreciated the discussion. There's lots of issues here, but we need to also realize that ARPA is extremely limited in what you can use the funds for as far as business retention and even human services related funding. So if we do forward this onto our Economic Development Commission, they need to be thoroughly aware of what the limitations are and what the regulations are as far as ARPA goes. Otherwise, we're sending them down a rabbit hole, and unless we intend on applying general funds to any program or suggestions they have, they definitely will feel as though they have wasted their time and effort if their recommendations don't fall under approved ARPA usage.
Thank you. Good opportunity to hear some details there that help us as well. So I think we're about ready to wrap up, just about. And I'll see if I can do a summary here when Councilmember Keel gets done. Councilmember Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, but Councilmember Belisi triggered me here. So I agree with what you're saying, that we don't want to send the commission down a rabbit hole. I totally agree with that. My comment had to do with not, hey, we got ARPA, tell us how you want to spend it. That wasn't what it was. More like, hey, here's some specific questions that we need to know about what businesses are doing. Like, what do they like? What are their pain points? That kind of thing. And then have them bring us back answers. And then when we get those answers, then we as a council can figure out what it is that we think we should do based on the limitations of ARPA and what we heard from our business community.
All right, thank you. So where I think we are is that we are we'll develop questions, particular questions, specific questions was the term you used a moment ago, for the Economic Development Commission to respond to. We'll put that into a resolution and have that on a future agenda as soon as we reasonably can. We'll also look at moving forward with a flash vote survey that can help illuminate some things. There may be a series of surveys depending on how much time. My sense is that there's an interest in doing a set aside of some yet to be identified sum of money for a future business program that we don't know what it is yet, but we'll be prepared with some resources when we do. And that we should, my sense also is that we should move forward with specifically sewers. That dollar amount needs to be identified, but we've got a general idea how big the bread box is, and we'll be able to move forward with that in the nearest future. Does that seem to be where we are, folks? Okay. All right, staff, do you have anything further you need from council at this point with regards to these issues?
I just wanted to make a comment. It's been very good for me to listen to your discussion, and as you know, my job has morphed to where I'm totally dedicated to the businesses in the city. And I will tell you, we have some incredible people out there doing business in UP. And I have been totally impressed by the businesses that have opened during COVID. And to hear some of their stories and their stick-to-itiveness and what it took for them to open, even when everyone was telling them, close your doors, they put their shoulder to the boulder and kept pushing. And so I love hearing that you understand the importance of small businesses to us. And I certainly am excited to dig deeper into this issue because I've been discussing with them. We know hiring is an issue, but many of them are scratching their heads and can't quite figure out what it is. And some of the anecdotes they've shared with me with their experiences with trying to hire just kind of make you wonder what the issue is. So I'm looking forward to getting more information. And the other thing I wanted to say is, we are not out of the woods yet with COVID. And I'm sure most of you are aware that a week or two ago, our Fred Meyer had to close because of lack of staffing, and Walmart did as well. And so, we don't know what's coming around the corner. And I think, to have a little money that we're ready to pounce with should something come up, and also to give us some more time to determine what are the real issues and how can we best help. I think this is a good course of action. And thank you for your direction. It's been very clear.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that, Becky. As speaking for the council overall, it's been a good discussion, and I think they've been able to come to it. But you set us up with great information, and appreciate your efforts to do that as well. So we'll have some more things to talk about in the weeks to come. Does anybody have anything else before we decide that we're done for this evening? So we're just a little ahead of schedule. Not a problem in my mind. So, if there aren't any objections, we're going to stand adjourned. And I don't see any, so we're adjourned.